internet situation. I really cannot explain what YouTube is doing these days. But anyways, we are not here to talk about YouTube because what is there really to talk about except like, you know, a colossal greed machine. But we use it. It's handy. It has brought us together. So I got to say thank you, YouTube gods, for that. But seriously, stop trying to monetize so hard and maybe make it work a little better. Okay, anyway, hankering for a nail here. That's me. We are here to talk about the Think Deck, all right? Enough ambling about. So what you're seeing in the main camera right over here where my big old mitts are is the ICRPG Think Deck. This just finally released yesterday. I had some delays because there were some tweaks I needed to make that were worth the delay. But here's the long and the short of it, because you probably never heard any of this garbage. For years, I have been using a poker deck. I have several different ones. We all collect poker decks if we're like, you know, weird gamer heads. I used a poker deck with my own kind of internal shorthand for designing content. And so when I sit down with my journal and my mind is blank as the ocean is wide, which is almost always, I'm just not sure what I'm going to do like that next night or with that next session or that next adventure. So what I'll do is I'll look to the poker cards and I'll pull like 4 poker cards out. And there was a time briefly years ago when I would use tarot cards, but honestly, tarot cards are kind of clumsy and they don't really feel that comfortable in your hands. They're not that fun to shuffle. Or if you're like out at pub and you're having a beer, people are looking at you a little weird because you're like screwing around with tarot cards. But poker cards are really natural. They go right in your pocket. Like there's something really intuitive about them. And if you've seen like a few kings in a poker card, you sort of know, or deck, you know that there are more kings coming. And there's a lot of like ancestral knowledge built into the poker deck. What I didn't realize is that I was kind of doing this. It was a little bit like under the covers of my own creative technique, my own sort of creative process to use a deck of poker cards. And then I sort of noticed myself doing it one night and I said, man, that would be cool to like get this on paper. Sort of the shorthand that's been in my mind. You know, I just kind of, you know, slopping my way through it like I do so many things. And so I thought to myself, whoa, I should start writing this down. And what happened next was a 72-hour freak show epiphany of writing down, documenting, and refining and doing all of the art for and doing all the layout and setup for this right here, which is the ICRPG Think Deck. So the Think Deck is a 54 card deck, just like a poker deck, 52 cards and 2 jokers. Comes in a tuck box just like this from Drive-Thru RPG. They're good quality cards, and their card making is shipping really fast these days, whereas their books are shipping super slow. So I don't know what that's all about. But the purpose of the ICRPG Think Deck is to kick you in the head when you're looking for sort of a creative punch for your next set of game masterwork. And so you kind of use it like a tarot deck in that part of it is drawing and part of it is interpreting. So if you go over and you look this up on Drive-Thru, you'll see it comes with a PDF. And the PDF is kind of walks you through how I perceive what these cards mean when you're asking creative questions of yourselves. So tonight, what I wanted to do, hello everybody, thank you for tuning in, is I wanted to throw down a few draws and sort of give you my interpretation of those draws. And let's play around a little bit. How does that sound? So I don't know if my cameras are working. Oh my gosh. This tech is not good. Okay. So, anyways, first thing, shuffling when you're doing a deck like this. You must only shuffle when you really feel like, I want to shuffle. I really must shuffle. Because when you shuffle, you might see reruns and you might change some of the creative impact. So the way that I suggest it is the smaller the granule of gameplay you want to design, the shorter the deck, or the shorter the draw. The shorter the draw. So if I want to design like a single monster, let's say, I want to do a 3-card draw. If I want to do more of like a room design, that'd be a 4-card draw. If I want to do more like an adventure or even a campaign, that would be a 5 or even 6-card draw. So let's start simple and let's design a monster using the ICRPG Think Deck. Okay, so here we are, and we're going to draw 3. Bang. And this is me asking myself, what is this monster going to be like? And here's my draw. So the draw is kind of the interesting part, but the interpretation is the magic part. So here we have a lesser obstacle of spades, we have a revelation of clubs, and we have a trickster foe of diamonds. So in the deck, you have types, which are represented by rank, just like in any deck of cards, and suit, which is also should feel familiar. Now, suits have come with themes for years, if not centuries. Spades are often associated with death and poison. Clubs are often associated with plants and nature and simplicity. Diamonds are associated with elitism or treasure or sort of high-end or leadership. And hearts, of course, are associated with blood and with love and with passion. So use that ancestral knowledge that you already have. So here's our monster that I'm designing for tonight. Interesting. So how can we read this? Well, first we have a lesser obstacle, we have a revelation, and we have a trickster foe. So this is kind of giving me the biggest hint. A trickster foe is a foe who uses stealth, disguise, or general deception of some kind to overcome foes. And this is also a trickster of diamonds. So this is a trickster with high-end gear. And so let's just say that I'm working on my next fantasy encounter. I'm going to say that this trickster foe sort of has like a cloak of invisibility. So since that right away is my most certain thing, and also diamonds to me represents that cloak of invisibility is like lootable. Like you can get that cloak, and that's that diamond, that's that elite component. That's what I'm getting from that. So I have some kind of creature in an invisibility cloak who's zipping around. And then we have these two to interpret, and these get a little more interesting and more difficult. And sometimes the more difficult the read on your draw, the more interesting it is. Like you're going to get some challenging ones, and hopefully we'll see that tonight. So right here, and yeah, you don't have to just order the cards. There is a DIY PDF version for those who are curious. A lesser obstacle. So I think that this trickster is using something. Now, what does an invisibility cloak sort of assassin or trickster use? And I think this could be like a tripwire. So the lesser obstacle is a tripwire. This tripwire maybe is set up to unleash a blade trap, okay? And this blade trap not only can be tripped by walking through it, but can be tripped at any moment by a little remote that, like a string or even a magical spell that this trickster enemy can cast. And so we have, this is going to be an element of this monster. Wherever you encounter this monster, you encounter this tripwire, and maybe we call this monster something like, you know, a blade, I don't know, a blade killer, a blade shadow. So a blade shadow is, oh, there, well, that camera has just decided to turn off, so you guys will no longer see my ugly mug. I was worried about that camera. The HD Life Cam by Microsoft, never buy it, just like everything from Microsoft. Anyways, so now you're just going to have to focus on the cards. So the blade shadow always uses this tripwire, and they can both use it as like almost like a claymore mine, something they activate, or something that you walk through, and they're going to use it as part of their tactics. So that's our first two cards. And by the way, the cards that drive through prints are really some of the best things that they do. I really like them, but some people are, you know, overseas where shipping from them can be difficult. Or maybe it's just a little strapped on cash, so the PDF can be the option. So finally we have this card, which can be a puzzling card, Revelation. And it's a revelation of clubs. And that's something. So actually, let's rewind. A tripwire, but this is a spade. So this tripwire does not unleash blades at all. It unleashes a poison cloud. So you see how we're reading deeper into the draw now? We have a shadow blade, which is this assassin who's basically immaterial. It's like a shadowy gas inside of a cloak that's moving around. Then we have a trap sort of attack that it uses, which unleashes poison gas. And this gas also creates a cloud that makes it even harder to spot. But then finally we have this card. This is pretty interesting, a revelation. So what this tells me, and a revelation of clubs, is that this enemy, at its either defeat or when it yields, because not all enemies fight to the death, it has something to offer the players about either nature or animals. So, maybe about nature. Maybe this trickster, before dying in combat, will always offer the recipe to this lesser obstacle as a sort of a negotiation to let him escape, to let him go. Don't kill me. You may have the recipe to the poison gas. It's very simple. It only takes a bit of worm root and a little sprinkle of magic dust, right? So we have our Blade Shadow now. That is this enemy that's been developed right here. It has sort of an angle that it's sort of introduced, which is, we all know what it's like when you sort of meet an invisible foe. It can be very disorienting for players. We have its kind of coup de grace, or its key attack that it makes, which is a tripped poison gas cloud. And then we have sort of what it uses to either survive or what can be looted off its corpse, which is a revelation about nature. This is a revelation about how it creates poison gas, which can be acquired by players. So there, we just designed a monster using the Think deck. So let's put these away and not shuffle them back in, because we don't want to get repeats. This is part of the fun of the sort of ancestral knowledge, as I like to call it, of poker cards, is that you kind of can count them without really even trying. So now we're back to our deck minus those 3 cards. And let's do something bigger. Let's do a room with 4 cards. Okay, here's our room draw. So again, the draw is part of the excitement, but really the interpretation is the magic part of this process, much like tarot. All right, so let's take a second and consider what we have. First of all, we have our, this is like sets the tone almost for the room. So we're designing basically an entire encounter right here. This is a deadly peril. Now, a deadly peril is very different than a monster. A monster is something you kill. A deadly peril is like a pit, like a bottomless chasm. And by the way, thank you, Tim. So this room is going to be defined, and look, we drew 2 deadly perils in the same room. This to me is very interesting. Actually, this feels like a race all of a sudden. Yeah, exactly, Keith. This is a race. Now, I want you guys to let that soak in a second, that word. This room is going to be a race. Now, why would I say that? Where did you get that, Hankerin? What the hell? What do you mean a race? That's because I've been working with this system via poker deck for years, and so I can see sort of through the cards. Now, let me walk through what I mean by a race. First of all, we have 2 deadly perils. One is a deadly peril of hearts, and that often is associated with blood. So I would like to imagine basically a river or a chasm of boiling blood. You fall in here, you die a horrible death. But then we have a deadly peril of clubs, which to me feels like a giant serpent or tentacle. In this case, I think we have a giant serpent which sort of swims almost like the Kraken, or like the creature in the garbage compactor in Star Wars. It swims in this river of blood. This is our double deadly peril. So falling in not only could be glub, 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 but also could be grab and crush. Right? And yes, Pete, you're starting to see through the cards, which I love. And then yes, Keith, you're starting to see it too. The Think deck also includes timers. So here we have a 3 timer. And on the far end of the draw, we have a doorway. And a doorway of spades. That's kind of interesting. So what I'm seeing right here is a room in which you have 3 rounds, unless players do something to delay this timer, to avoid this problem and cross it, prevent not going in it, being sucked into the river of blood by the blood serpent, to reach the far end, which is a doorway of spades. Now, a doorway of spades is not just a doorway. It's like, well, spades, what are they? They're always the dead, blades, death, poison. So there's a bone lock, we could call it. A massive door that is locked with a skull. And this skull can only be opened by sort of some kind of dire offering. Or maybe like a gem placed in the eye of the skull, and the gem is somewhere else in the room. Now I'm going off my draw a little bit, but it doesn't matter because I'm off and running. I'm creating a room. This is the magic of how this works. The magic isn't in the deck. It's just a thing I made. The magic is in you and how you see your draw. So really quickly, I want to jump into this stuff a little deeper. The deck includes both timers as well as targets. a lot of times folks ask me about how do you choose the DC in a room. In this case, you could separate out your timers and targets from your deck and keep them separate and draw them. Then explain the difficulty, rather than putting all the burden on yourself to figure out what the difficulty of an encounter is. You could have a difficulty sort of mini deck, which would just be a few cards, and draw it. And there should be a little bit of a gasp or a sigh of relief at that moment from your players. And it's just one more thing to remove decisions from yourself, which is always a good idea when you're game mastering, as we all know. These can also be used, so often people ask me for table aids instead of dice to show what the timer and target are currently. And like, here, let me grab my skull. So one idea I wanted to do in the deck is that these could be used as a table aid when COVID's over and we're all playing together like is meant to be. So I have these skulls here, and the skulls have a little mini holder on top, and it can hold a card like that. So you can actually make a super visible table aid that shows your timer really big on the table and holds it up high like that. So I wanted to do these cards for that purpose as well, not just for the creative draw. Okay, so there's that. Now you might be asking, what if I get like 2 different timers or 2 different targets in a draw? And I think that's where, again, the burden on you to make an interesting interpretation happens, right? It's not that, oh darn, I got 2 targets in the same draw. No, the burden is on to you to say, maybe during the encounter the target changes from one to the other. Maybe there's an escalation or something worsens. So let's do another draw. This time, let's ask ourselves, what is this campaign going to be all about? You ever have that moment? Let's give that a try. Let's do a 5-card draw and see if we can come up with a campaign. And there's no tricks here. I shuffled and I'm drawing a lot of reds tonight. I have no idea why, but it's just happening. Thank goodness there's a black. And that's already 5. So I got 4 reds and only 1 black. It's just weird how cards kind of play out that way sometimes. But we have to have, truth in our draws and truth to our systems. Wow, look at this. Unfortunately for the heroes, we have 2 components that are just not going to make this campaign one where the heroes are having an easy time fighting goblins. These are supreme enemies. We have a roleplay foe who is basically a foe who doesn't fight, who can only be swayed by negotiation or other means, maybe even an offering, a gift. Then we have a supreme foe. This is your dragon. This is your lich wizard. This is your undead king. We have a lesser obstacle. We're going to work through these. A greater obstacle, and then ally of spades. Now that's interesting. Now notice, I'm not fascinated with every card. Like, these 2 fascinate me a little bit less, the obstacles. So if I'm thinking about a campaign right now, I could sort of elevate my cards by interest. And I gotta say, of all that I drew here, this is the most interesting card, the last card. So elevation by interest kind of goes like this. So let's just break it down. What could the components be in the starting point of a campaign? There is a sort of I don't like, just playing the ruler card. So maybe a mind flayer who is beyond the power level or the power reach of the characters, but is looking for something. Looking for something. I see that right there. The campaign has a route where an enemy is asking you for something, and they will not relent in their villainy until they can get that offering from you. They're a role-play foe. They are not a combat foe, and that's our starting point. The players are either imprisoned or waylaid or sort of leveraged by this flayer in a way that sort of kicks the events off. This supreme foe, I don't think they're going to be meeting early in the story. He kind of lives up here somewhere, and this is our dragon. This is our later in the campaign, and it's a little bit obvious to draw this, honestly, when you're conceiving of a campaign. This just says, hey, in your journal, write down an idea for a supreme foe. And I'll be like, oh, well, frick, man, Black Dragon. I've been wanting to do a Black Dragon campaign. There you go. So I'm not, going crazy creatively right there. Now these 2, I basically see almost like a Middle-earth journey here. We have a lesser obstacle, which is like Mirkwood, and we have a greater obstacle, which is like Osgiliath. Now, you don't have to translate those one-to-one, but I'm seeing sort of a pattern in this journey, and this journey is being driven by our roleplay foe. Now, what I was saying earlier, you don't have to be fascinated with everything you draw, but this card, to me, is quite interesting. An ally of spades. That is an interesting thing. So remember, spades are about blades, are about death, are about skeletons, are about poison, deception, true evil. That is what the symbol of spade is. But this is an ally. And here could be the rub of a true concept for a cool campaign. A campaign where players are forced to retrieve something for a villain. And their only ally is an even darker entity. Just that. You could take that numerous places as a game master. But what's important is that the cards have kicked you in the head to say that this could be an idea that you're going to try. And then, of course, your journal comes into play. All right, let's get back down to the small. And let's think about a trap. Look at that. Let's just stick with it, okay? It's because those are what I was showing earlier, right? So I didn't shuffle them back into my deck properly. But don't turn away now. Trust the cards, even when you shuffle horribly like I just did. Let's just embrace it. What the fuck does this mean? We have a 4-timer, a 12 target, and an inverted 3-timer, which I kind of just didn't notice and just flipped it inverted because of my shuffle. This is a trap we're designing. I don't have fixed rules for how you interpret this stuff because I think the creative mind is anathema to fixed rules. So first of all, this trap has a delay on it, and that's what that 4-timer is. I'm just going to take that literally. So when the space is entered, the hallway or the chasm, whatever, this little timer starts. The 12 represents it's a relatively low target to either disarm, understand, or reduce the deadliness or avoid this trap. Now we've got the weird card. Again, this is the strange thing about these draws. Not everything is fascinating. These two cards are not that fascinating, but an inverted 3. So generally when I draw an invert, I do exactly that. I take it as to mean the opposite. So instead of a 3 target, I see this as dropping the target by 3. Okay, wait a minute. That's kind of interesting. So maybe, the timer, dropping the timer by 3. Not the target, the timer. Interesting. This is how it works. The trap triggers, and you can make it whatever you want, but the trap triggers. Right? The stone is descending and pulling the cable. The trap is happening. With a target of 12 and a few clues, players start to poke around, and if they fail, the timer is reduced by 3 right away on the first failure, and the trap is about to spring. So, do I really have the most ingenious trap design here, giving me all the information I could ever dream of? Hell no. But the draw has already sent me down a chain of reasoning involving numbers I can write down in my journal. Now let's follow up since we really didn't get a great explanation there. This is more details about our trap. Look at this one. So when our trap springs, we have a lesser foe of spades, which can often be interpreted sort of as a skeleton, or an analog in your game world of what a skeleton might be, a lesser obstacle, and then more. A lesser foe of diamonds to me represents a leader. So now I'm almost getting a sense of space here. When I do it this way, I don't know if you guys can, there we go. Here is our trap. Our trap is a room in which the opening salvo of mook enemies, of low HP, low damage enemies, is all sort of these skeletons or undead frogmen or troglodytes, something to that effect, and then hiding behind a lesser obstacle. And in this case, a lesser obstacle of hearts. That's either blood or romance. So I think actually this skeleton is behind like a wall of bodies. That's the lesser obstacle. And this skeleton is the supreme one. He is the magic caster. He's the one casting fireball. So the trap is juk, 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 flunk. The whole thing opens up. The skeletal army pours out. These are these guys. And behind them, protected by a wall of corpses, you have a spell-slinging super skeleton. Now, we could have drawn a lot of different things here for what a trap could be, but it wound up being that. Does it fit your game? Not sure. I'm kind of imagining a somewhat generic fantasy campaign as our context. Let's think in sort of sci-fi terms for a second. So, I'm looking into designing a session for my sci-fi game. What could it be about? I really like drawing 4. 4 feels pretty natural to me. Let's see what we get. And this will be the last one, and then I'll let you guys get on with your Friday night. What's up, wizard? All right, so here's my session. We've got a doorway of hearts. We've got a somewhat difficult target, a 15 target. This could really, I could just make a decision that for the whole session, the target's going to be 15, just like it was last night in our Warp Shell game. Then we've got Doom, and this is really worth talking. This is the Joker in the deck. This is worth talking about. And here we have a 2-timer. How do I interpret this for coming up with a session? I'm going to have to say that almost every time in a sci-fi game you have a doorway. A doorway is a lot like a bulkhead or airlock. And this airlock is central to the goals of the players. So, I don't really have a card here explaining what's beyond that doorway to help me come up with an idea. But I do know they're going to be struggling towards this doorway. And maybe because it's a doorway of hearts, it requires like a DNA sample to get through, right? Blood. So we have a doorway you can only pass with a DNA sample. We have a night-long session DC of 15. All my timers max at 2. So this is going to be a fast-moving, almost like an A-Team style game. And that's what I'm going to interpret this card to mean. No matter what I roll, so if I roll a D4 for my timer, I just cut it in half. It's either a 1 or a 2. Every timer is fast. This is going to be a fast night of gameplay. And then we come to this, Doom. There's only 2 of these cards, and they don't have a suit in the deck. And in the PDF that you'll get with the Think deck, really, Doom is referred to as something to be fled from, not something to fight. And so I always think spatially, and so I'm going to reverse my draw a little bit like this. Doom is coming. It's like back here. I always think left to right like this, right? Doom is coming, and when it arrives, it will be annihilation. This is the Genesis wave from Star Trek. It is rolling behind the players, and the only way that they can escape it is to access this bunker or this station or this starship. And the only way into the starship is through this sort of DNA door. Now, I'm kind of like, whoa, exactly. There's a lot more to figure out. And Scott, no, I don't have my DJ gear set up yet. I'm in my new house, and I'm not quite set up, so sorry about that. We'll get back to Friday nights soon, though. So Doom is coming. It's not something to be fought, but to be fled. We've got a 15 all night. We've got a maximum timer of 2 all night, no matter what I come up with. And the DNA door is sort of going to be the end of my session. Now, obviously, sort of thinking spatially, this area right here is a complete mystery. Why not throw a couple cards into it? Maybe I can get some ideas for what the session might be about. So here come the black cards finally. A revelation paired with Doom like this always tells me that that revelation is about the Doom. So wait, now we're starting to see a session. Players are fleeing this sort of Genesis wave. And in the course of the action, while they try to break through this sort of, what could you call this? This is a base. This is a fortification. Almost like maybe you have a bunch of squags with laser rifles and they're all sort of, or wait, this is spades. So you have like skeletons in cosmonaut suits and they are all guarding this bunker. That's their job. Only the elites can get in the bunker to avoid the Genesis wave. And along the way, the players find out, this is a revelation of spades, that the Genesis wave is all been a lie. It's been pitched to the intergalactic government as a way that they're going to terraform planets, but in fact what it does is it skeleforms planets. The revelation is a revelation of death. The creators of the Genesis wave have deceived everyone, and it's actually a wave to wipe the cosmos of life itself. And the only way to survive is inside this bunker beyond the DNA door. Now, I still have a lot of work to fill in, but I'm starting to get a sketch for a session. And that is how the Think Deck works. It doesn't give you all the answers. What it does is help you find your own answers. And in a lot of cases, it more so just helps you find your questions. Questions about what's going to happen in the session, about what could be the ending, what could be the beginning, what could give it gravity, what could give it excitement, and then some really banal questions you could answer too, like what's the DC of this room for dex checks and strength checks and stuff like that. Just draw, and it's like, oh, it's 15, it's 12, and suddenly you're relieved of that decision. And I think that relief, that is the very purpose of this deck, is to help relieve you of that endless sort of decision fatigue that comes with being a game master. And that's why I've had so much fun using a deck of cards over the years. And we did a poll on Patreon about what was most useful about Index Card RPG, about the old volumes. Like, remember way back in the beginning, I didn't even publish an RPG. I just published a bunch of art on index cards. The most popular usage of those 400 cards that I did were to sort of give yourself ideas, to kick yourself in the head. And so I've, in my mind, boiled it all the way down to this nice, compact deck, which comes with your tasty little tuck box, which, if you look at my Ghost deck, the thing is like worn to shreds because it's been in my back pocket so long, and it's been camping so many times. So you get this nice little tuck box for your deck to go in your back pocket. And in time, it will be worn down, and it will be ratty, and it will be cool. That is the ICRPG Think Deck. I'll put a link to DriveThruRPG, but you guys can use Google. I think you got it handled. I just wanted to put it out there because I'm super excited about it. When I got the whole thing figured out, like I said, it was 72 hours of pure insanity to get the schema done, to do all the art, to build all the publishing stuff, and did that whole thing like in a freaking epiphany of bonzo. So I wanted to get the word out here on YouTube, which is so volatile lately. So sorry about the false stream earlier. I'm not sure why YouTube is dropping now and again these days. But what are we going to do? We'll just kind of keep on streaming, baby. Keep on streaming. Because it's way more fun to see you guys commenting over there and be kind of running in real time than it is to do recorded videos. Recorded videos are cool, but honestly, it feels kind of like making like gag TV or something. I know they're funny and they have a lot of like cool art, like right up here and everything. It just doesn't quite feel as human. When I'm live, I'm right here. You guys know I'm like in my room right the F now, just like you, out there striving and surviving, getting ready for Friday night and the weekend to be just as glorious as we can make it. Okay, so it's 52 cards and 2 jokers, which are Doom in this case. So it's a 54 card deck. Go check it out on DriveThruRPG. And if you ain't got the ducats for the full deck, just grab the PDF. You can DIY that stuff. There's also a scheme in the PDF about how to just use your favorite poker deck to translate the results to get the same like idea factor. It's not about pulling in all the revenues. It's about getting those idea kicks out there and getting everybody some relief from that like decision fatigue that comes with being a week-to-week GM. A lot of us are running 2-3 games a week, and when you're doing that, your brain just starts to go to mush, and you need all the help you can get. So that's when your old buddy Ingrid is kind of like, scratching my chin, think about what I got to do there. But then, I don't know, I just want to take a bike ride. All right, so everybody, keep it real. Don't steal. You're always going to get a deal. Pull one out for your old homie, Hanker Inferno. I miss all you guys terribly. I miss everybody. I miss the world. We're all going to get back together. Like, I don't know, it's probably going to be in 2021 with when this whole dang apocalypse is over. We're going to be in our gas masks, and we're going to have our like M1s, and we're going to be walking along with our shopping carts and be like, yo, Ingrid Burno, what up, dude? And I'll be like, hey, man, peace. So until then, I'll see you guys on that old internet, all right? Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And check it out and stay tuned for stuff. I'll just keep on streaming. Just keep on dreaming. Oh, yeah.